curiosity in like how websites and the computers worked, combined with the curiosity of like, you can make money on the internet, led me down a whole rabbit hole. And I was very curious about that.
What was that moment like where you decided to abandon all of this training that I've done?
But it was when I realized you could actually make YouTube videos teaching stuff. That was a big unlock. So when I started the YouTube channel, it was always in the back of my mind that I don't want to create a trap for myself. Will I, quote, just be a YouTuber? I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. I felt like I needed to prove something. And I realized that I'd kind of fallen into the trap that I was trying to avoid. We always talk about leaving money on the table, but no one ever talks about leaving mental health on the table. I kind of realized something about the fragility of life in the midst of that health crisis. I said to my team, guys, we're not filming any videos. I need to take some time to think. What would your life and work look like if you optimized for enjoyment at every step? Are you having fun? Are you profitable? Are you serving people? Are they happy? And are you happy? That's enough.
Welcome to the Curious Humans podcast, Ali Abdaal.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you feeling in this moment in your body in 3 words?
Relaxed, tranquil, but also heavy. And I feel that's because of the fairly fat-filled lunch we've just had, where I had like a chicken sandwich with like loads of cheese and loads of fries. And I was torn between the salad and the sandwich and fries, and I went with the sandwich and fries, and now I feel a little bit of heaviness down here, which is weird, which is kind of nice because I don't normally do interoception, but like having drunk your Kool-Aid for the last like 4 days, I'm like actually being aware of sensations in my body. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, the question I love to dive in with is, were you a exceptionally curious child growing up? And if so, can you remember a story about something you were curious about?
One thing that I was really curious about was, this was like when I was like 12. I might have been 11. I was in secondary school, and I happened to be in the computer room for an ICT lesson. And there was a kid who was like just wrapping up the previous lesson, and he was on the computer, and he had a web browser window open, and he had the source code for the Google homepage open on like the notepad equivalent back in the day when you right click and hit view source. And I saw that mass of letters and numbers, and I was like, whoa, this guy's like some sort of hacker or some shit. Like, he's really cool. And I was very curious about that. I was like, I wonder what all those letters and numbers mean. And so I Googled how to code and like found that this was a thing, and went down the HTML rabbit hole and started teaching myself web design. And that sort of collided with another curiosity where a friend of mine about 3 months later mentioned that you could make money on the internet. And so it was like this curiosity in like how websites and the computers worked, combined with the curiosity of like, you can make money on the internet, led me down a whole rabbit hole of learning how to code, age 12, 13, building websites, emailing freaking Nintendo and stuff, and being like, can I make a game out of Pokemon? And they were like, no. Trying to email Blizzard Entertainment to be like, hey, can I use World of Warcraft like imagery on my website? And they didn't reply. It's just like things like that. That was the thing that I became obsessed with after school. Like I couldn't wait to rush home from school to tinker away with the websites and like learn more PHP and stuff. And now looking back on that was like, I don't know, 16 years ago. But that was such a sort of seedling of what would sprout into my first business and then my YouTube channel, and everything else has all been as a result of seeing that random kid in year 8 with a view source window open and thinking, whoa, that's really cool. I want to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Wow. I love that so much. There's so much to dig into there. Related question. Were there any stories or maybe video games that really resonated with you growing up? Maybe like the narrative gripped you, and the reason that I ask this question is often there's a kind of parallel between the central narrative of some of these stories or movies and the arc of our own hero's journey in life. So with that in mind, are there any stories that like really gripped you? I saw you wearing Harry Potter socks yesterday. So
I'm wearing Pokemon socks today. Harry Potter was always my favorite, but I also used to really enjoy the Alex Rider series and the Cherub series, both of which were about kids who became spies. And this idea of like, I think about this some of the time, like these sort of hero's journey arcs where whether it's Harry, age 11, learning how to become a wizard, or like James from the Cherub series learning how to become a secret agent, or Alex Rider being told that his dad worked for MI6 and now he's got to go on all these missions. All of these things where like an otherwise young and unassuming kid was able to do really, really cool shit and learn cool stuff. That there was something about that always really appealed to me. And, one of my first attempted businesses was I tried to make an online forum when I was like 14 that was going to help other teenagers learn like secret agent skills, like lockpicking and like kung fu and hacking and stuff. I knew nothing about any of this shit, but I was like, oh, if we make a forum, we can get experts to come in and like teach about the thing. And now that's basically 20 years later what my productivity lab thing is, where it's like
what was the domain? What was the URL? Does it still exist? Can people...
It was a UIA Academy. UIA standing for United Intelligence Agency. Oh my God, I don't think I've ever mentioned that on a podcast. We had a sick logo, built a shitty website. I didn't have a debit card, so I couldn't get an actual domain name. So I used a .co.tk domain name because those were free and didn't require a card to sign up to. Then I had to lie about my age to make a PayPal account. And like 15 years later, they actually blocked that PayPal account because I had to submit my driving license for ID verification. And they said, we have closed your PayPal account because you violated the terms of our agreement 15 years ago when you lied about your age. And I was like, PayPal, come on. All the more reasons to hate PayPal. They already charged too much, the foreign exchange fees, and now this. But yeah, I was very interested in this whole like secret agent lifestyle where you could teach yourself stuff and like do cool shit in the world.
Wow, this is great. I feel like I'm getting like the true backstory here to your life story. From the kid who saw the Google source code and was like, wow, and then taught himself HTML. Like, it feels like those were both very empowering moments. What did that create then in your own personal journey? And how did that moment inform what then kind of came over the next decade or so?
Yeah, I like that word, empowering. It felt really empowering. I wouldn't have used that word at the time because it would have been weird for a 13-year-old to say I feel empowered.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt empowered. Because like in school, and I guess connecting the dots looking backwards, in school I was always kind of doing the thing that I was told because I was always striving for like rank 1 in the year group and all that, good grades, blah, blah, blah. But there was very little creativity to that. The only creativity I brought into my project was because I was also into graphic design. So making my coursework look really nice was something I took a lot of pride in. But beyond that, I was very much painting within the box of the school system and optimizing for exam grades, which is a specific type of game. But the thing that I was doing after school was like rushing home, posting about my services on this free freelance website, trying to hustle to get work, getting $5 here and there, feeling like, oh my God, you can make money on the internet. This is so sick. And it's because I think at the time we also didn't get pocket money because my mum didn't believe in pocket money. So my only sources of income were like birthdays and Eid and the freelance web design gigs. And so the fact that I could take making money into my own hands and build stuff as a 13-year-old in the evenings without asking my mum for permission that could then be put on the internet to make money, like completely blew my mind and was very empowering. So for the next 5, 6, 7 years of my life, the thing that I was doing when I should have been studying was building websites. And so that launched my first business when I was or my first successful business when I was 19, or I was helping people get into med school, which then directly led to me starting a blog in 2016, which directly led to me starting a YouTube channel in 2017. And here we are now 7 years later, having written a book and stuff. And still to this day, tinkering with the CSS on our landing pages and like tweaking letter spacing and line height and margin and padding and stuff that various people in my team don't quite get.
Arguably not the best use of your time.
Yeah.
But it's still potentially maybe really fun.
But it's still fun, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. And what was so what was like, it feels like there was an inflection point where you decided to officially leave medicine, which is something you'd presumably been training for the last 5 to 7 years. What was that moment like where you decided to be like, okay, I'm going to abandon, I guess, like the sunk cost of all of this training that I've done and go full time on basically like backing myself to make a living from YouTube and business stuff?
Yeah, it was a very long drawn out decision. And actually when I was interviewed on Lewis Howes' podcast, School of Greatness, like in 2020 or something, 2021, that was a real accelerant of that decision. Where initially I was thinking, I would be a part-time doctor and a part-time YouTuber because, I knew a lot of part-time doctors who were happy. And I like the idea of not being a full-time YouTuber because I thought there was something weird about being a full-time YouTuber. And I was talking to Lewis Howes about this and he sort of challenged me on this. They're like, why do you actually want to be a part-time doctor? Like, why would I want to see a doctor who's like putting part-time effort into it? And I was like, well, if everything crumbles down and at least I've got medicine. And like, my YouTube channel is more worthwhile if I have the badge of doctor being attached to me. And he just sort of challenged me very nicely about both those points. He challenged me being like, wait, so are you telling me that if you lost everything, you wouldn't be able to make $100,000 within the next year? I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I probably could. And he was like, and your way of making 100 grand as a doctor in the UK is by training for another 10 years until you finally make 100 grand. I was like, oh shit, I've never thought of it that way. So there was a lot of like identity that I had attached to this idea of being a doctor. It was less the sunk cost and more the, will I quote, just be a YouTuber? And given that my videos are about productivity, I also didn't want to get into this weird state where I'm making videos about productivity, which are actually about how I make videos about productivity. And you get this weird loop type thing. Whereas I thought that, hey, if I'm a doctor and I have a real job and then I do YouTube on the side, that's like, it's like a nice thing. And so it took a while to like disentangle those and realize what I really wanted.
What is it about? I mean, obviously you've done a bunch of things, but YouTube seems to be the thing that like really stuck and really resonated. What do you think it is about the creative process? I know you've created, is it over 800 videos at this point?
Yep.
What really lights you up about YouTube? And this is partly a selfish question because I'm about to go into YouTube. So like, what has given you that, I guess, like longevity to create that many videos? And what do you love about it right now?
So I don't really vibe with the word creative. I don't, or in the past, I didn't used to think of myself as particularly creative. But I do vibe with the idea of teaching. So teaching, I realized that teaching was always the thing that lit me up. So one of the sources of income I didn't mention is that when I was 13, I started doing maths and English tutoring at this study center where I was helping kids with their maths and making £4.50 an hour. And it was really fun.
Like, it was a minimum wage at our age, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when I was in school, I would help the kids below me and even some kids in my year. When I got to uni, I would help med students in the year below. When I started working as a doctor, I became a physiology supervisor for one of the Cambridge colleges. And at every stage, I just really enjoyed teaching. And it was something that really lit me up about it. And so when I discovered YouTube, initially my dream was to be a music YouTuber. And so the first couple of videos on my channel are me trying to sing songs with my friends. But that was just, I mean, it was fine, creative expression, a hobby and all that stuff. But it was when I realized you could actually make YouTube videos teaching stuff. That was a big unlock. I was like, oh, I could teach people the things that I know. I could teach people how to do well in these med school exams. And oh, maybe some of them will sign up to my course. Oh, I accidentally stumbled into organic content marketing because, for my first business. Then when people started asking me like, how did you study for exams? Or how are you using your iPad? Or what are the apps you've got on your iPhone? I was like, oh, okay. I mean, this is fun. I get to just share the things that I'm doing. So, And I never really thought of myself as a guru. And later on when I was writing the book, I had a writing coach called Azul, who, I really struggled with the idea of writing a book because it sort of felt so authoritative, like I know what I'm talking about. And what Azul said to me, he was like, one way of writing a book is to be a guru, but another way of writing the book is to be a guide, where you don't have to be the guru. You can just be the guide. You can say, hey, here are some things that have worked for me and try them out and see if they work for you. That's what a guide does. A guru is like, I know the answer and this is the answer. And I never really vibed with that. Yeah. So when I think of YouTube videos, I just think of them as teaching. Yeah. And I'm not at all attached to YouTube, the platform, but I am attached to teaching as a thing. And YouTube happens to be a good medium to do that.
I love that. That reminds me of advice I got from a mentor of mine. He was saying like, be an invisible guru such that you present yourself as that and then you disappear like as soon as they try and like follow you, or you disappear around the next corner. So it's like you present yourself as all knowing and knowing this thing, and then you give over the empowerment to the reader or the viewer.
Oh, that's nice.
And like remind them that ultimately they're the ones that can teach themselves. So I'm really curious about the book writing process. You've recently published a book that was, I believe, a New York Times bestseller. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But what did you learn about the book writing process? And also, where did the title Feel Good Productivity come from? What's the inception behind that?
So the title came about 2.5 years into the book writing process. I learned a lot during the book writing process. People have often asked me, like, was it fun and did you enjoy it? And it's like, even though the whole shtick is to be productive, you want to feel good, and my whole shtick is find a way to enjoy your work. Mm-hmm. There were lots of aspects of the book writing process that I didn't enjoy. And actually, kind of piggybacking off the interview that we just did for my podcast, I think on a lot of it, it was because there were emotions that I was unwilling to feel. I felt a lot of imposter syndrome going into the book writing. I felt like I needed to prove something. I felt like the thing I wanted to say had to be really good and really evidence-based and really like fit together and stuff. And I kind of put a lot of pressure on myself because it was a book and with Penguin, and my grandma's heard of them and
Legit.
stuff. Like
Yeah.
real book in people's hands, and like, my goodness, people are going to write reviews on Amazon, and I don't know who these people are, and like, oh, what if they write negative reviews? So there was a lot of like pressure that I built up around the book, to the point that like the writing process was quite, I'd say, painful quite a lot of the way, because I was sort of lugging around this backpack of rocks of like imposter syndrome, perfectionism, feeling like it needs to be good, worrying what the critics are going to think.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'd speak to writers who've written books, there'd be a bit of a relief. It's like I'd take the backpack off and I'd be off to the races. But very quickly, I'd put the backpack back on voluntarily and continue to write and approach the book with this heaviness around it.
Mm.
Now, having done it, I feel like, oh, okay, I see the process from start to finish. The next one and the one after that is going to be way more fun, because I now saw what parts of the process I put in way more energy than I necessarily needed to, because investing that energy and trying really hard didn't actually contribute to a better book. It just sort of made me expend more energy to essentially do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great answer.
You're asking about the title. Yeah, Feel Good Productivity. The title actually came in the shower in the most cliched fashion. So the book initially started off as the productivity equation, and that was the initial proposal, and it was accepted in the UK. But then when we sent it to some US publishers, there was a guy called David Moldauer who worked with James Clear and a couple of our other friends on book proposals. And he basically said it's a terrible, it's not very good. He said that like, no one's going to read a book called The Productivity Equation because it sounds boring. I was like,
it's great to get feedback like that.
I was like, damn, that's really useful. And he was like, and it's also too complicated. Like, there's too much shit going on. It's like we're trying to how to find meaning in your work, but also trying to enjoy your work, how to be more efficient. It's just too much
like
shit
that
going
part
on.
of you is trying too hard to be credible and be perceived
Yeah.
as the expert.
Yeah. So what David said to me was like, look, you're successful. People watch your videos about productivity. If you had to boil it down to just one thing, what is your secret? And I was like, oh, it's easy. I just make everything fun. He was like, great, write a book about that. And initially I was like, but that's not a book. That's like a chapter of a book at most. But with a bit of work from David and our editors and agent and stuff, I kind of realized that, oh, actually, this idea of to be more productive, just make your work fun, that actually is a whole book, because there's so much that goes into that. Like, how do we actually make work fun? It's not just about choosing things that are inherently fun and just doing those. It's actually about the way you approach your work and the strategies you can use to apply to anything you're doing, however boring, to make it a little bit more enjoyable. And so it was like, with this idea in mind, initially it was called the productivity game. I was never a fan of, but like, okay. Then it was like the fun factor. Then it was like dynamo, the idea that like, if you put in work to make your work fun, you get more energy out of it. Then it was like the energy wheel at some point. And we played around with like hundreds of titles. And it was really when it was like in the shower, I was kind of thinking through this, and I was thinking, okay, well, what am I really trying to say? Like, I came across this theory of positive emotions that said that when you experience positive emotions, it means you're more creative and less stressed and stuff. And I was like, positive productivity? Nah, sounds shit. Positive emotion productivity? Good vibes productivity? Maybe good vibes. But I know Vex King has a book called Good Vibes, Good Life, so I can't like plagiarize that. What's another way of saying good vibes? Feel good productivity. Feel good productivity. It sounds reasonable. It's not quite as nice as Atomic Habits, but it's like feel good product. But like it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Feel good productivity. And I was like thinking about this in the shower, and then I was like, I got out of the shower, sent a loom to my editor, agent, through my 3 editors and my agent, and mentioned this to a bunch of team members, and everyone was like, yeah, feel good productivity. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And in a way, it's like, how to be productive while feeling good. But also in another way, it's like, to be productive, you should feel good. And it just sort of started to work. And then it required a radical restructuring of the book to then fit around the title, which was kind of annoying, but it roughly worked out in the end.
It's a great story. And I love like almost like peeling behind the curtain of what appears as now as like, like a very polished, beautifully written, outlined New York Times bestseller. And like actually the process behind that was pretty messy and pretty much like trial and error.
Super messy.
I think something that I really want to talk to you about, and something that I've been following your journey to some extent. And it feels like you've, in the last 6 months to a year or so, made decisions to deliberately like de-optimize your life in certain ways. Correct me if that's not correct, but both in terms of like maybe leaving money on the table, in terms of like being a YouTube machine and factory, in terms of traveling more, going to events like this. Like what has been your kind of thought process around deliberately de-optimizing, which is, in some ways like the antithesis of being productive. Like how have you approached this, and what are some changes that you've made?
Throughout my journey of YouTube and then business, at least since the channel started, I was always kind of mindful of the fact that I wanted to enjoy the process. I think I drunk a lot of the Jason Fried, DHH, Basecamp kind of Kool-Aid around this, around running a calm company, and it doesn't have to be crazy at work. And back in the day, it was their blog, which was very opinionated around, growth for growth's sake is not the thing. And actually, you want to, Jason Fried talks about how he never sets any goals. And I always really vibed with that idea, because there was something, being in the UK and in Cambridge, where there's like no startups other than medical tech stuff, which I wouldn't have even come across. I didn't have the Silicon Valley mindset of like growth at all costs. And hearing like the Basecamp approach around like the idea that you can run a calm company, that, hey, if the business that you're doing helps customers and is profitable, great. Like, you don't need to double every year or whatever the thing might be. Around 2016, when I discovered the Tim Ferriss show, I came across Derek Sivers as well.
Derek's amazing. He's been on the podcast too.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So he has a book, Anything You Want. There's a line from that book that really vibed with me. This was before I had the YouTube channel, while I was still growing my first med school admissions business, where he said, never forget why you're really doing what you're doing. Are you having fun? Are you profitable? Are you serving people? Are they happy? And are you happy? That's enough. I was like, oh, okay. So I kind of had those philosophies when building my first business. So when I started the YouTube channel, it was always in the back of my mind that I don't want to create a trap for myself. And then I ended up creating a trap for myself where, everything was all hunky-dory when I was a part-time YouTuber, because I didn't need the money. And so the money was coming in. But when I sort of accidentally became a full-time YouTuber, because it was the pandemic and I wanted to go to Australia to do some emergency medicine, but they didn't let me in because they closed their borders. I sort of accidentally ended up being a full-time YouTuber. And then I sort of accidentally made a course about how to be a YouTuber, which is still running to this day, called the Part-Time YouTuber Academy.
Very, very good. I've taken it.
Thank you. But that was never the thing. There's like running courses on how to do YouTube was never the thing that I wanted to do. But it was just like I couldn't not do it because the money was too good. And then we were getting into this model of like launching. And then we kept having students coming in and people liking the course. And then we had to hire more people to service the people liking the course. And we ended up creating this kind of like machine where during the time when we were running live cohorts, I sort of felt like I was on this hamster wheel of, we do a launch, we do the cohort for 6 weeks. It's exhausting. Cool. Then we have like 2 weeks before we have to then start marketing for the next launch. And it was like this sort of relentless thing, which was printing loads of cash, but it wasn't particularly fulfilling, wasn't particularly joyful after the first couple of cohorts. And then the process of the book came along, and it just sort of felt like constantly, even though I quit my 9 to 5, I ended up starting a 24/7 kind of thing. And it's like that whole thing of constantly trying to make YouTube videos, trying to launch a podcast because it's a good thing to do and adds longevity to the brand, running our YouTuber Academy, writing a book, building a team, learning how to manage a team for the first time. All of that, which is quite a lot of stuff. And it was quite fun and exhilarating, but also very exhausting. And especially after the book came out a few months ago, actually even before then, maybe about 6, 7, 8 months ago, I had a moment where I had decided I was going to travel the world, do the nomad thing. And we thought, you know what, let's do a Tim Ferriss and let's batch film YouTube videos. Let's, do a week in Austin where we're going to film 15 videos that week, 3 videos a day. And I'll fly out my YouTube producer and look at the cameras and stuff. And just before flying to Austin, I had to take a trip elsewhere because a close friend of mine had a health crisis. And so I went to go visit him. And I realized, in that week when I was hanging out with my friend, I didn't really do any work. I was just sort of playing PlayStation and hanging out with him and his mates and watching Netflix and stuff, and doing barbecues. And I kind of realized something about the fragility of life in the midst of that health crisis, where I was like, hang on, like if this guy hadn't had this health crisis, I would be in Austin right now, filming like 3 videos a day back to back for like a week, just so I can have content, and then just so I could be free from filming YouTube videos for the next month. What's up with that? So then I went back to Austin. I said to my team, guys, we're not filming any videos. I need to take some time to think. And I started to sort of create this analogy in my mind. Was it's sort of like, I sort of felt like a cow, where I'm a cow and I choose and I milk myself. This analogy doesn't quite work, but I'm a cow and I milk myself some of the time because milking myself is fun. This is me starting the YouTube channel. And then over time, I realized that, damn, this milk sells for a lot of money because loads of people want this milk. They want to taste the milk.
Golden milk.
Yeah, the golden milk. And so I'm like, great. Well, given that my milk tastes so good and makes all this money, I should, I should hire people to milk me. And so I got an editor and I got a writer and turned into general manager and I got an assistant. And I was like, well, the milk tastes so good that we should really build a farm around my udders. And I sort of every week I'd voluntarily go into this milking apparatus. We would have this whole machine with this whole team that would milk me for the content. And that content would be chopped up and would be sold and distributed across the world. And people were loving the milk and the milk was selling for loads of money. We were even able to franchise an aspect of the farm and teach a course about it, about how to build your own fucking industrial apparatus farm to milk yourself. And eventually I kind of realized that I was tired of being milked. One of my team members said, it sounds like we want free range milk. It's like, I still enjoy producing milk. I still enjoy making the videos, but I would like to do them on my own terms rather than voluntarily walking into this industrial milking apparatus. And so that was kind of my journaling that I was doing when I was hanging out with this friend with a health crisis, to be like, I realize I'm a cow. Mm-hmm. I want to be a free range cow now rather than a kind of a battery farmed cow. So that led to me realizing and doing some journaling and realizing, okay, why do I feel like I'm on a YouTube video hamster wheel? Because at that point I had a few million in the bank in stocks and blah, blah, blah. Surely you had enough money. And then it's like, what was keeping me making YouTube videos? And I realized that I'd kind of fallen into the trap that I was trying to avoid, which is the trap of basically tying myself to a job because of the money. Because I realized that in a world where I had like 100 million in the bank, and surely in that world, I wouldn't feel any scarcity, although I know people who have 100 million in the bank who still feel scarcity, but that aside. But if I had 100 million in the bank, would I choose to make 15 videos in a week batch filming? Hell no. I'd make videos when I felt like it, when I felt like I had something to share. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who is a founder who has exited his company for like literally 110 million. So is in that position. And he had the option of like staying on and like earning out his blah, 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 whatever. But he had spoken to a bunch of other exited founders, because apparently there's groups for founders who are mega rich. And they all basically said, you need to be okay with leaving money on the table at some point, because otherwise you tie yourself into a job, which is not what you want. And even if that is tens of millions of dollars, you don't need those tens of millions of dollars once you've already made it. It's okay to leave money on the table. And that kind of realization that it's okay to leave money on the table was what helped me think, okay, I felt this enormous wave of relief. That as long as I'm okay to leave money on the table, that's the price I have to pay to make videos when I feel like it. And I shared this in my email newsletter, and someone replied with a really thoughtful reply saying she also found this as an entrepreneur. And she said that, we always talk about leaving money on the table, but no one ever talks about leaving mental health on the table, or like peace of mind, or like family time, or like time to do your hobbies. And the only thing we talk about leaving on the table is money. And so that realization, a very long-winded way of saying that realization kind of made me land on the idea that I actually can just make YouTube videos whenever I feel like it. And then weirdly, once the book was done, I felt like making more YouTube videos. And someone commented on a video of mine recently being like, I swear a few months ago, Ali said he was going to pause making YouTube videos, but he's churning them out like more rapidly than ever. But it's like all the videos we make now are videos that feel good, because I'm like, I actually want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be about 2 videos a week that we do where I feel like doing them.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that story. This is fascinating. And part of me wants to pick up on that thread of like, when you focus on the enjoyment, that the external metrics actually tend to happen anyway. I'm also curious about like drilling a little bit deeper into money, because it seems to be like both for people listening. I'd love for you to share like, how is your experience of life different now compared to when you were studying at Cambridge? And then the second part of the question is, what is behind the motivation of setting the goal to build a $10 million company in the next like year or two? Because it feels like there's potentially almost like a conflict there that might not be, but that's just what I'm picking up on.
Yeah, I think about money a lot, both from a how to make it and also how to think about it perspective. So when I was younger, what money meant to me was being able to buy extra screens for my desk. Because, if I saved enough money from birthdays, Eids, and my tutoring job, and my $5 here and there from freelance web design, oh my goodness, maybe I could buy a laptop now, and now I wouldn't have to share computers with my brother. So that was like a big thing.
Great.
Then it was like, now I can get a screen for my laptop. Now I can look on Reddit battle stations and see that they've got 3 monitors. Man, if I saved up at this current rate for 2 years, I could have 3 monitors on my desk. Oh, how fucking sick would that be?
I'm just imagining you in your room with like 15 monitors, just like
It's like, yeah, exactly, one of those people. So that's what money meant to me growing up. Then when I got to university, or just before university actually, I got scammed out of about £1,000, which was my life savings at the time. I was going to buy a MacBook. I was going to buy an Apple product for the first time because I couldn't afford them before because they're expensive. And so I saved up £1,000 from private tutoring and stuff to buy a MacBook Air. And then some dude on Gumtree, I met up with him in Paddington Station, and he sort of sold me a computer that didn't actually work. And I was dumb, so I didn't check it and didn't look at the serial number and stuff. So I had this £1,000 shaped hole in my heart, and I really felt feelings around like, oh my God, this feels terrible. And then I tried to find him. I tried to take him to small claims court, tried to find his address through his geolocated tweets, blah, blah, blah. And eventually my mum said to me, like, look, forget about this guy. You're about to start uni. And she just bought me the MacBook Air from the actual Apple store in Lakeside. So that was very nice of my mum. So thank you, mum, for that. I don't think she's listening to this, but that's okay. So money at that point was like, okay, now I need to recoup these losses because I felt like I'd lost something big. I'd lost my life savings. So how do I make them back up? And I have the Evernote file from 2012 where I wrote down how do I make money? I'm good at making websites. I'm good at exams because I got into med school. I'm good at teaching, I think. So what if I made a course teaching people how to get into med school and made a website for it? I was like, okay, let's give this a go. And that was the thing that launched this first business off the ground. And in year 1, we made like 10K. So I was sort of 10x to the loss. In year 2, it was 100K. Year 3 was 150K. And this was while I was a medical student.
That's impressive.
And so those revenue, the profit was around £40,000 each year. And so £40,000 is about the salary of a junior doctor. But from second year onwards in med school, I was earning 40K a year. And so I felt really rich because it's like in my first year of uni, I had to think about the price of things. And like, I shouldn't go to Subway too often to buy a footlong whatever because it's like $5.99 and whatever. And maybe I shouldn't buy a raspberry cookie too often because that's an extra whatever. And, you know, the water is like, I can get free water from the tap, or, you know, that kind of thing. But then as soon as I started making 40K, which was making me ridiculously rich compared to students, suddenly the price of meals didn't matter anymore. And I could get a takeaway whenever I wanted. It's like, oh, this is nice.
Like it brought you peace of mind and it brought you just like ease.
This is very freeing. It's very nice. And I don't want to pretend I was on the poverty line or anything like that. Like my mum would have just sent me the money if I wanted to buy food. So it's not that kind of story. But it really brought peace of mind. And then when the YouTube channel started, the money started to become passive when I started getting AdSense rolling in. I remember, you know, the first time I made like £5 in a day from AdSense. And I was like, oh, wow, I can get a coffee every single day and still be profitable. Then I started making £10 a day, 15, £20 a day. I was like, whoa, these are, and like I wasn't having to work for these because these were all videos I'd already recorded. And this felt like true passive income.
Past Ali was doing the work for you.
Exactly. And then very quickly, my YouTube earnings started to match my doctor earnings. And occasionally, like the consultants at work would ask me, because they would like, word got around that I was a YouTuber. And one time on my surgery placement, I remember I was in the consultant's office after an evening handover or whatever, and there were like four of the consultants chilling around. They were all like sort of in their 50s, but like quite laddie because they were like, you know, general surgeons. And you know, one of them just straight up asked, be like, "Hey, Ali, we've heard that you're a YouTuber," and they asked, you know, how much money are you making from that? And at the time, I said, "Oh, it's about £4,000 a month," and they were like, "What? £4,000 a month? That's how much Andy makes in his private practice." What? And Andy was like 55-year-old general surgeon who was making £4,000 a month in his private practice. And they were just like, what the hell? Like, what are you still doing here? Like, why not leave? And I was like, oh, interesting. So over time, then eventually when the numbers became just absurd, like 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month, 50 grand a month, 100 grand a month, you know, that kind of thing. That was when money stopped being a tangible thing and started to be more like just a scorecard, just something, you know, making numbers go up is kind of fun.
Do you have a sense of what that point was where it went from being like tangible thing to scorecard?
I think it was when it started to exceed my doctor salary. Because at that point I still was thinking, oh, 4K a month as a junior doctor is pretty good. It's like 2.8K after taxes or whatever the thing might be. And all my expenses were well within that. Like my mortgage was, I don't know, £1,000 a month. I mean, I wasn't spending money on anything else because I'd go to work, I'd go home and I'd go to work the next day. So it's like the money was just sort of accumulating. And so it sort of felt like playing with house money when I had a job and the money was coming in on the side. When I quit the job And now it's like the money that was coming in had to fund me. That was when it started to shift towards more scarcity again. Because I was also always thinking like, what if this goes away? Well, what if I become less popular as a YouTuber? What if the money runs out, et cetera, et cetera? And that scarcity was what then sustained me for a long time, thinking, okay, I need to have at least a few million in the S&P 500 to 4% withdrawal rate, blah, blah, blah. And then, we launched our first cohort of our YouTuber Academy, and we made about $250,000 in a week. And that was more money than I'd ever seen before in my life. And I was like, bloody hell, that's to change things. And the next cohort, I think we halved the numbers, but doubled the prices, and we still made 250K. The third cohort, we made like 600K. And now there was this weird hedonic adaptation to money. And I still have the screenshots from back in the day where I was like losing my mind that we did 50,000 pounds in a single day. And one of our cohorts, I think it was cohort 5 or 6, this was post-pandemic, made less money than the previous one. And we only made 400K from that cohort. And I felt that as a massive disappointment and a real sense of like, whoa, fuck, we've only made 400K from this cohort. I was like, what the fuck, 400K? That's 10 years of salary of a junior doctor. And we made that in a week. But it felt like only 400K because it wasn't 600K, it wasn't a million. And so that was like a real confronting of the idea of just pure hedonic adaptation to the numbers. I think how I think about money these days is it's gone more towards the scorecard mode again. Having that realization that it's okay to leave money on the table, and realizing that I don't need the money, but it's kind of nice to have, was quite nice and quite freeing. But there's still definitely a part of me that still feels scarcity, that like, the business only makes a couple of million profit a year. And, if it were to go away tomorrow, that's not enough to live off forever. It's only enough to live off for 20 years. Shit, okay. It's like, and the more I think about this, the more I'm like, wait a minute, like, I really shouldn't feel any scarcity about this at all. But then I speak to other entrepreneurs who are richer than I am, and they all feel scarcity as well. So I kind of feel like there's like something there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. It's fascinating. And I think there's such a, like, our relationship to money is often it's rarely talked about. It's kind of taboo in a lot of circles. And I've also met people who, had millions and millions in the bank. And my perception of them was they were miserable. And so when I was younger, for a period of time, I was like, oh, that must mean wanting money is bad because these people are clearly miserable. And I've kind of worked through some of those kinks myself. And I now I feel excited to make money. And there's a skepticism that I feel in myself when I set a purely money-based target, because I'm like, what is the thing that I actually want that number might be like a proxy for, might be an indicator, but it's not the thing. And so that's why I was like, when I heard you say like my goal this year is like build a $10 million business, I was like, like there's like something there that I wanted to like poke at.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. I've poked at it myself many times.
Yeah.
I've also had a weird relationship with goals over the years, as like, goals and targets and stuff. In the early days of my YouTube channel, I deliberately didn't have any goals beyond one video a week. I didn't have any subscriber goals.
Process goals versus
outcome goals, exactly, because the outcome goals were outside of my control.
Yeah.
And then as I started having a team, it's like it started to make sense to have outcome goals because they brought focus and clarity and direction to the team. And me saying, oh, I just want us to enjoy the process, is like, okay, but like, can you tell me what's me doing a good job? That kind of thing. And so, this year we did annual planning, and all of my coaches basically said, hey, it's useful to work back from a revenue goal, because then you can figure out, the sorts of things you would do to get to 10 million are different to the things you would do to get to 100 million, which are very different to the things you do to stay at 5 million, for example. So in a way, it became a sort of lens that would guide our options. And after I had this realization a few months ago of like, oh, it's okay to leave money on the table, all of a sudden that acceptance that it's okay to leave money on the table made me treat money with more lightness, more like, oh, it's just a video game. And there was a moment a few weeks ago where I had like a free Saturday, and I was in London because I was going to meet a friend for dinner. And I had a free Saturday. I was like, okay, what do I want to do with the Saturday? I can do whatever I want. I probably can't go into Knightsbridge and buy a McLaren, but like beyond that, I can literally do whatever I want. And I found myself going to the local WeWork, WhatsApping some friends who I used to study with in med school, being like, hey, I'm co-working from WeWork. Do you want to come? I scanned them in because no one's around on the weekends. And we had a great day of co-working where I was just tinkering away on Figma, doing website designs for Productivity Lab, which was a new product we were launching. And it was just really fun. And I was like, on a weekend where I had the ability to do whatever the fuck I wanted, the thing I chose to do was work on the business. And that made me realize that, working on the business is often more fun than playing video games. It's like its own video game, the video game of entrepreneurship. And like all video games have levels. I'm playing Horizon Forbidden West on PS5 at the moment, but I'm playing on very hard difficulty. And I like that. It's a good level of challenge. It's not, I don't like ultra hard because it's too grindy. You have to do too much shit in ultra hard and you die too often. But very hard is a good level of challenge where you die often enough that it feels like a challenge, but not so often that it feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall. And similarly, our business did like five-ish million in revenue last year. And so I just thought, you know what? Why not? Let's go for 10. And it's like genuinely about 90% of that feels like a video game, and about 10% of that feels like still the sense of scarcity and I want more money. But mostly now it's this sort of video game idea of, once I was okay with leaving money on the table, my desire to make more of it became, I think, more like chill.
Yeah, that's great. I love that answer so much. And what it brings up in me, or what I want to really ask you, is sticking with that analogy of like business as the infinite game and as a video game. One metaphor that I work with some of my coaching clients is like seeing business as a very efficient vehicle for surfacing your own shit. Basically, business as a kind of arena for working on yourself, like up leveling as a person. Yeah. And so what are some ways in which, particularly as you've like grown a team, scaled the business to 5 million, what has that brought up in you, and how have you like leveled up your like character rank, let's say, as Ali Abdaal, the player, in your life in general?
Nice. That's a great question. I also think of this quite a lot. I think of like, in this world of video games, like, what are my different stats? So, I mean, the business has leveled up various, because there are various stats or skill points, shall we say, related to the game of business itself. Yeah. So things like leadership and management and stuff, and words that I would have previously thought in a previous life were all bullshit, but actually learning how to lead a team, learning how to manage a team, learning how to set goals effectively, learning how to motivate the team behind a vision, a mission, values, and 10-year plan and 3-year picture and blah, 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 blah. It's like all of this stuff that to me a few years ago would have felt very corporate. Now I'm like, okay. Things like project management and keeping people aligned and accountable and communication in organizations and stuff. There's all these like specific skills that I never had because I never needed to have them because I was working in the NHS, that I now have developed. Obviously, it's still infinite growth and stuff, but like that I developed over time. So that's like almost like the outer game of business. Then there's more inner game stuff. I think one big area of level up, I think the business, but actually more so being in a relationship, but also the business has leveled up my EQ stat in an interesting way, because as you grow a team, basically all the problems are people problems. And recognizing that, actually, the way I communicate with Angus is actually not effective, because actually he would like to be communicated in this way. And he is more of a maybe emotional type person. And therefore, for me to communicate with him with such like directness and stuff is actually just unhelpful. And actually showing more appreciation and nurturing and stuff is more effective in getting the thing that I want, which is everyone to have a good time and work towards growing the business. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. Showing appreciation and praise and, those sorts of softer skills have also developed through the business thing. Final thing that I can really point to is growing the business has, I think, changed my relationship with pressure. Because when I was a doctor, there was the pressure of, well, obviously saving lives, but I was only ever a junior doctor. So the buck never really landed with me. There was always someone I could go to, someone senior whose ultimate responsibility it was. And when in doubt, you always just call for help and stuff. But now running my own team and being responsible for their payroll and for some of their mortgages and some of their kids' school fees and stuff is like a different level of pressure. And when all that pressure is like, a lot of that pressure is tied to me continuing to make YouTube videos, that was like an interesting self-exploration and self-growth type thing of being okay with that pressure, but also trying to not think about it too hard, because if I thought about it too hard, I would feel a sense of coercion and external expectation on my YouTube videos, which then removes the creativity from them and the joy from them to an extent.
I'd love to kind of circle back to what you talked about earlier, which is this idea of like focusing on enjoyment, which seems like it's been one of the big insights from the last few days and maybe accumulating from maybe the last few weeks. What is it about? What has helped it land in your system, this idea that focusing on enjoyment might actually be one of like the key metrics or the thing to focus on?
So I think when David, the book editor, asked me what's been your secret, And my answer was, I just find ways, I find a way to make everything fun. Like that was and is still very true. But it's only recently that I've realized just how deep that runs. So back in the day when I was studying for med school exams, I found a way to make it fun by bringing friends along and by color coding my revision timetable and experiencing a sense of progress and having the right background music and hopping libraries and coffee shops to realize, oh yeah, when I'm working in different places, it just feels more fun, and running these experiments on myself to figure out how can I make studying for these boring ass medical exams a little bit more enjoyable? How can I test myself, turn it into a game, blah, 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 blah. And so that helped me perform better and also made it more fun. Then when I was growing the YouTube channel alongside being a doctor, and it was like I'd get home from work and have to spend a few hours editing a video time and again every single night for 2 years before I outsourced my editing. How do I make that fun? Okay, well, if I approach editing from this perspective, if I kind of try and improve a little bit each time, if I do these funky transitions and maybe use cute logos and include some bloopers, it's like that makes the process of editing videos a little bit more fun. And so that was kind of the idea that the book was based around. Like, what are the levers we can pull to make whatever we're doing more enjoyable? But really, something I've really taken away from this weekend, and speaking to our friend Joe Hudson particularly, like he coaches multi-billionaire CEOs and stuff. And his shtick was also, at every stage, just optimize for enjoyment. I was like, no way. There's no way it works on that level as well. And you know what? Apparently one thing he says to his team is, you know, for this project, don't try to do it right. Try to do it in a way that's enjoyable. And in doing so, I guarantee it will actually be better than if you try to do it right. And hearing him say that made me realize, oh shit, like, like all of the best things that have happened in my business in particular, if we just use that as an example, have been when I was enjoying the process. And along the way, I have, even though I've literally written a book about it and literally have my phone screensaver that says, well, what would it look like if it were fun? I only think about that on a superficial level around like, oh, background music and friends and stuff, but not on a deeper level of like genuinely, what if I only did things that were actually fun? And I think because back in the day, as a doctor, you can't only do things that are fun. You kind of have to do what you're told, and you have to do what's in front of you. You can't just choose to only do things that are fun. But as an entrepreneur, you can in fact choose to only do things that are fun. And so there's that axis of like what you're doing, which is enjoyable, but there's also the axis of how you're doing it. So my book is very much about how you're doing it. But actually what I've realized is, I actually could only choose to do things that are fun.
I love that so much. And actually, Joe, we've had a conversation as well, and he says that in his business, he only does things that are fun. And if he finds himself doing something that isn't, he will outsource or remove it. And I think that's such a wonderful delegation framework. I think you had a phrase in your book. It was the phrase "enjoy the process." It's about strategically stumbling into what works. What are some things right now that you feel like you're strategically stumbling into?
One thing, I guess, you know, a big philosophy in the book, which is, I think, also vibes with your approach to life, is kind of the experimental mindset, thinking of things as experiments. So one experiment I'm doing a lot these days is just the experiment of, well, what's in my calendar and what's the structure of my working weeks and my working days. And I am, in a way, trying to stumble into what, for me, is like the ideal week or the ideal day. And I found that, working out in the morning is great. And as long as it's with a personal trainer, because if it's not, then I half-ass it and don't motivate myself. So, okay, cool. So personal trainer, that's one thing. Making sure I have at least a few hours each day of deep work feels really good, because then I can read and write and stuff. And that's like my infinite game. Yeah, my calendar is weirdly packed even with that. So what if I had Mondays and Fridays completely empty, where I wasn't even allowed to schedule anything? Oh shit, I'm still saying yes to all these things that I should be saying yes to. Cool. Let me make a checklist of things that I have to go through in order to say yes to anything that's landing on a Monday or a Friday. Cool, let's try that. And so it's almost like this constant iteration and experimentation of like what's working. And I guess I didn't quite have the language to describe it, but I guess what I'm going for is like how I'm feeling at the end of each day. And this was something we talked about in our conversation. Yeah,
metric.
Yeah, exactly. But I haven't been conscious about that. I've just been more like, I guess I sort of have. One thing I commented to a friend about was like, at the start of this year, I was working out pretty much every day in the gym every morning with a personal trainer. I was feeling pretty great. And then I moved house, and then I was in between gyms, and I couldn't be asked to find a personal, blah, blah, blah. And I was still feeling totally fine. Like I'm feeling very tranquil, but I wasn't getting to the end of the day thinking, damn, that was a great day. That was a joyful day. Yep. And then like last week, I started resumed in a new gym with a personal trainer, 3 in the morning, three times a week in the mornings, at like 7:30 in the morning. At the end of all 3 of those days, I commented to my partner, that was a really joyful day. I was like, interesting. There's something about working out in the morning, first thing with a personal trainer, that contributes to the day being joyful. Okay, that's useful to know. And now that I have the language of introspection and stuff, it's like that's something I'm going to check in with at the end of each day to feel like, okay, how am I feeling about today?
I love that so much. That's awesome. I do the same thing incidentally. The other thing I wanted to I'm curious about is you've clearly worked with a bunch of different coaches over the years, and you mentioned something the other day that spending money on coaches has been some of the highest ROI of your time and money.
Yep.
For people listening who maybe are curious about hiring a coach, what advice would you give in terms of like what types of coaches to hire, and what are some of the insights that you've learned from this? Maybe business and life.
Yeah, nice. So I've never really hired a life coach, but a lot of business coaching is kind of life coaching, just sort of
Packaged differently.
Packaged differently. Yeah, executive coach is basically therapist for business people. Yeah, that kind of thing. On the business coaching front, it's like the analogy I heard that was really good was that even Roger Federer has a tennis coach. And
Of course, Roger Federer.
yeah,
has
of course,
a
he has a
tennis
tennis
coach.
coach. Like, you wouldn't dream of a world in which like a professional tennis player wouldn't have a coach. So why do so many business people trying to grow businesses not have a business coach? I'm like, that's interesting. Like that was kind of a bit of an unlock for me. The other thing was I first started working with a business coach when I randomly ran into this guy outside Adam Brooks Hospital in Cambridge, and he recognized me from my videos. This was in like 2019 or something when I was still working. And he said, "Oh, hey Ali, I recognize you from videos. How's it going?" And this guy seemed cool. I was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And he said, "I'm an executive coach for GSK, the big drug company." And I was like, well, "Executive coach? What, like what?" And he was like, "Yeah, I help coach their teams on business strategy and I help them grow their business. And this is like a really like multi-billion-dollar company." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." And he was like, "Have you got a business coach?" And I was like, "No." He was like, "Would you like some free sessions?" I was like, "Hell yes." And so he happened to live just outside of Cambridge. I would drive to his house, and he, for the first time in my life, I got what it was just like. He would just take out this A3 pad of paper with like some Sharpies, and he would just ask me, "What are you struggling with in the business right now?" And I'd be like, "Oh, well, videos seem kind of hard because I seem to run out of ideas." He was like, "Okay, what's your process for making videos?" I was like, "What do you mean? What's the process of making videos?" He was like, if you were to break it down into, imagine like a factory line, an assembly line, like what would the process be? I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess there's idea generation, then there's title and thumbnail, then there's video itself, then there's filming, then there's editing, then there's publishing, then there's repurposing, then there's analytics." And we kind of sketched out that process, which I'd never done before. And he was like, "Okay, how much time are you spending on each of these?" I was like, "Okay, well, I'm spending most of my time editing." Have you considered finding an editor to get rid of?
No way.
I was like, "Shit, no, I genuinely not considered that because I just never I just never saw the process laid out."
Wow.
And so that was my first experience with a business coach, where he was then like, "Okay, do you have any goals for the year?" I was like, "What do you mean goals for the year? I listen to Jason Fried and I have no goals." And he was like, "Okay, that's fine, but like, it's sensible to at least just pretend like we have some goals. So like, what would be nice to accomplish this year?" "Oh, well, I'd love to release my first course on Skillshare." And he was like, "Okay, when in the year do you want to do that?" I was like, "Oh, like March." He was like, "Okay, let's put that as your Q1. The first time I heard about quarters, I was like, "Okay, the Q1 goal is we're going to release blah, blah, blah." And it was like, and then the next one, and the next one. And so we basically sketched out every area of the business and made a quarterly roadmap for the rest of the year in like 2020, or whenever this was. And it just gave me so much clarity that like, oh, this is the business. This is basic ass shit. I was so unsophisticated with business. And over time, as the business grew, I was working with a few different coaches. And at each stage, that coach would sort of help us get to the next level by me realizing all of the unknown unknowns, the things that I didn't even know I didn't know. And a business coach has had experience coaching other business owners and probably running their own business. So with my most recent coach, Eric Partaker, started working with him 2 years ago. It was actually because I was interviewed on his podcast and he mentioned he was a business coach and had coached executives and had worked at Skype when they sold to eBay and then had built his own restaurant chain. I was like, "Oh, interesting." And he seemed to know his shit. So I said, "Hey, can I be one of your clients?" So he sent me this like the assessment, like your nervous system assessment, and I scored terribly. It was questions like, "Does your business have a clear vision?" It's like, "Nope." "Do you have your annual goals written down somewhere for everyone in the team to see?" "Nope." "Do you have quarterly goals written down somewhere for everyone in the team to see?" "Nope." "Is everyone on the team aware of their exact roles and responsibilities?" "Absolutely not." "Can everyone in the team recite the core values of your business?" "Absolutely not." "Where are your metrics and scorecards?" "Nowhere." Like, what? So it's like, oh, okay. There's all this stuff that a proper business does that we weren't doing. And so in the sessions with Eric, we didn't start off kind of going through the syllabus, as it were, But we kind of went through this assessment, and he was asking me to describe some of the problems I was having. And at the time, I had a team of like 10 or something. It's like, yeah, it's kind of really hard because I don't really know what they're all doing. And like, I'm sure they're working hard because they're all nice people, but like, I don't really have a sense of like what specifically they're working on. I don't want to micromanage them because that's kind of weird. It takes too much time. And he was like, okay, this is where goals and scorecards will just transform your life. Because he was like, if you set a list of goals for your team and each week they reported on their progress towards those goals, would that solve your problems? I was like, yeah, that would be fucking sick. He was like, okay, so that is what's called a scorecard. Here's what one looks like. And he put up a Google sheet. I'd be like, oh. And we set goals using an OKR framework. And I was like, I've heard of that. I read the book by John Doerr, but I didn't do anything about it. And so we started setting OKRs and started tracking metrics. And at that stage of the business, that was the thing we needed to help me let go of the vine and give my team more autonomy, because I was getting these reports each week and then I could feel happy. And now I don't even need to look at the reports because Angus is my general manager and managing the reports. But it's like at each stage, there were always unknown unknowns that like the easiest way to do something other than hiring someone who's done it before is asking for advice from someone who's done it before. So like if you were trying to grow a YouTube channel and you and I were just chatting, it would just make a lot of sense for you to ask me for advice. Similarly, if I was trying to get jacked, I would ask you for advice, that kind of thing. Or if I was trying to do the nervous system stuff and I knew you, it would just be dumb for me to try and figure it out on my own. It's like, I know you, Jonny. Jonny, you're the guy. Just like, can you tell me what to do? And that's kind of what a business coach does. It's like they have context about how businesses in general operate so that they can identify the unknown unknowns.
You read a shit ton of books. And I've really enjoyed a bunch of the book summaries you've done. In the last, let's say like year or so, what have been one or two of the most impactful books that you've read, and why?
There's a really rogue one called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale.
Oh, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a really random one. It was actually an audio program recorded in like the 1950s by this guy called Earl Nightingale, who was like the Tony Robbins of the 1950s kind of thing, or like 1940s, 30s, something to that effect. And they turned it into a book, a really short book called The Strangest Secret. And it's basically the audio program, which was broadcast on the radio at the time, was around what is the difference between like how do you become successful? Like what do people who are successful, and I think by that they meant rich, have in common? His whole shtick is that the strangest secret is that they figure out what they want and they write it down. And that was it. They literally just figure out what they actually want and they write it down and they look at it every day. And that had a profound impact on me, because this is the whole, like, all this evidence around goal setting and stuff. I realized that a lot of my, I guess, uncertainties and anxieties around my business were basically because I didn't really know what I wanted with it.
Totally.
And because I had a team of like people, it's like me not knowing what I want means the whole team doesn't really know where the business is going, and we're changing direction all the time and stuff. And it kind of made me realize, oh, okay, in my work, in my health, and in my relationships, I actually can just take a few hours to days to really figure out what I want, write it down, and start working towards it. And that was kind of what made me start taking the concept of goals more seriously, more sincerely. So now this year I have goals for work and for health and for relationships, and I'm slowly working towards them and I'm keeping track of them. And each week when I do my weekly review, I review the goals, and it's just really useful, because previously I've tried New Year's resolutions and I would never look at them ever again. They were completely ineffective.
Yeah.
But now that I read The Strangest Secret, I'm like, oh, okay, you just need to figure out what you want and write it down and look at it every now and then.
Can you give an example? Because actually it sounds obvious, like, what do you want? But most people don't know. And the first thing they say tends to be like the surface level thing. And then it's like, well, what would that give you? And like, what do you, and I find it going like 2 or 3 layers deeper can be helpful. So what's something that going through this process, reading this book, you identified of like, wow, I actually want that?
Yeah, so reading the book turned me on to a guy called Jim Rohn, who was a few years later after Earl Nightingale, who has a book called Goals, which is literally about his goal setting process. And Jim Rohn tells a really interesting story of how he was like 29 or something, and he met this like really successful business person, and the business person became his mentor. And one day, Jim and this guy, I can't remember his name, Mr. whatever it was, Jim and his mentor were out for breakfast. Jim asks, hey, Mr. whatever, I really want to become successful. I really want to be a millionaire in the next like few years. Like, how do you do it? And the mentor says, okay, Jim, well, I've got an idea. Why don't you show me your list of goals and we can start going through them, and we can start from there. And Jim was like, I don't have a list of goals. And he was like, I thought you didn't. Yeah, because if you actually had a list of goals, you'd probably have been a millionaire by now. And then Jim Rohn got onto the idea of goal setting, and it's like now he's got this whole process for it. But it was like kind of following the thread of these different books made me land on a process for goal setting, which is basically, I've adapted it to suit my sensibilities, but really sort of begin with the end in mind. So what do I want written on my gravestone? What do I want my obituary to read? And I actually wrote out my own obituary. Working back from that, what are some things that I might want in the next 10 years? This was actually really, really helpful. I hadn't done this before, but it's like, imagine thinking, okay, in the next 10 years, what are some things that you think you might want? And these are things and experiences, and what might you want to learn? What might you want to see? What might you want to do? Where might you want to visit? Who might you want to spend time with, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole thing is that like you have to write it down. If it's even a vague possibility or a vague desire in your mind, you have to write it down. And imagine if you don't write it down, it's just never going to happen. So you should, if private jet is on that list, don't worry, don't judge yourself. We know materialism, blah, blah, blah. Put private jet on the list, because if it's not on the list, it's not going to happen, but it might as well be on the list. And then you make this list of these things, all these things you might want in the next 10 years. And then by each of them, you put the time frame, like, 10, 5, 3, or 1. Is this something that I can see myself wanting in the next 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, or 1 year? So I wrote like 4 kids and big family house. That was like a 10-year thing, because it's kind of impossible to do in 5, that kind of thing. I think I wrote private jet on mine, but that was 20. I was like, that's going to be a bit like, I also wrote, I want to learn how to snowboard. That was 1. And I had a few things for 1, 3, 5, and 10. Then he says, okay, now if you had to pick only 4 things in each time horizon, 10, 3, 5, and 1, what would those 4 things be? And so that landed me on, the family stuff. It made me realize I want to build my own like co-working space where it's like an office and podcast studio attached. Like that would be really cool. It kind of gave me permission to dream about that.
Feel good co-working.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a good name. We should trademark that. Kind of made me realize that I actually really want to improve my singing. That was one of my 3-year goals.
Nice. You have a great voice. You should use it more on podcasts.
Thank you. So like 2 weeks ago, I started singing lessons. Well, 3 weeks ago, something like that. And this like very specific process of goal setting ultimately landed me on a set of 1-year goals, which were, I realized, grow the business to 10 million, in health, to get into the best shape of my life, and in relationships, to host 6 mini adventures for family or friends.
Wow, fun.
So I've hosted 2 of those already. And the plan is to do another 4 in the year, if not more. And it's just this very specific process of goal setting that has really changed the way that I think about being more intentional about, in particular, health and relationships. Because yeah, the goal that I landed on for the business was grow the business to 10 million. But the goal I also landed on was get into the best shape of my life. And then I figured out, okay, well, I sort of overlaid my own like system on this like goal plan system, GPS. So let's say health, get into the best shape of my life. That's the goal. The plan to me is, what are the 3 to 5 big things that are going to get me there? What are the big chess moves? So it's like, well, personal trainer 3 times a week, 150 grams of protein a day, 10,000 steps, eat broadly healthy otherwise, progressive overload. If I did those 5 things, would I be in the best shape of my life? Yeah, absolutely. There's no world in which I wouldn't be in the best shape of my life. Okay, cool. How do I do those 5 things? Okay, and now it's system. Like, how do I systemize this? Okay, cool. I need time blocks in my calendar 3 times a week for the personal trainer. I should pre-book and prepay for the personal trainer, so it's accountability. I should make sure I have a protein shake every morning, because it's hard to get 150 grams of protein otherwise. All of this stuff all stemmed from really knowing that, like, actually this year I want to get into the best shape of my life. And that was from this random ass book by Earl Nightingale, which led me to this random ass book by Jim Rohn. And I actually followed the process in it. I was like, oh, this is really, really nice.
I love that so much. And I love that you also wrote your obituary in that as well. That was something that I've done a few times, and it was a practice I did in a course that I taught, and it's so powerful. And there was a way in which we actually did 2 obituaries. One was if you lived an unintentional life, and one was if you were intentional. Which
nice.
Because like seeing like the hell version of like, this is, what or who I could become if I don't kind of actively steer the rudder of the ship, is almost just as motivating, if not more so, than the good version.
Damn, that's really good. Yeah, I like that.
But thank you for sharing that. I love that story. So I've got a couple of rapid fire questions, and then I think we'll wrap up. First question is, what do you see as the most common barrier to feeling good in your life?
Taking things too seriously.
Yeah, reminds me of the Alan Watts, be sincere but not serious. Yeah. What is one alignment experiment or hypothesis that you are intending to run in the coming weeks or months?
One thing I'm doing is, we talked about it a bit earlier, but like setting very strict rules for what goes in my calendar and giving myself more space in my life to be able to enjoy life more, but also to be able to think more creatively about ideas.
Yeah, this one's selfish one. What advice would you give to someone like myself starting a YouTube channel for the first time?
You've taken my course, so you know all the 50 hours of advice that I'll give on this. But broadly, I would say you have expertise on a thing and you are charismatic at talking about the thing. So don't overcomplicate it. I know the funky stuff you're doing with Mark and like all these elaborate videos that you're doing. And I worry that, and this is all well and good for the first few videos to flex your creative muscles and stuff. But when you have the gift of knowing stuff about a topic and being able to talk about it kind of off the cuff, you don't need to put so much work into the videos. You can just title the video something that people commonly ask you, or just something basic, something you were teaching in your course, and spend 5 minutes bullet pointing it and speak from the heart. And that allows you to put out 3 videos a week.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas doing an elaborate, proper ass thing forces you to make 1 video every 3 months.
Yep.
And most YouTubers I know who make 1 video every 3 months are very burned out. And most YouTubers I know who are just fairly chill about making 3 videos a week are fairly chill. So like, 1, 2, or 3 videos a week with this kind of low lift approach.
Cool. That's very helpful.
You also have, I think, the advantage that the space on you, the space you're trying to be in YouTube is not very crowded.
Yep.
If you were trying to make productivity content or like financial education content, God forbid, it would be really hard to stand out. But because you're in a blue ocean kind of on YouTube, good production value, which we've got with these cameras, plus competent personality speaking on camera, which you already know how to do. You've taught the live courses, plus subject matter expertise, which you already have. Just allow that to come through and speak from the heart.
What is most alive for you right now? Or what is one upcoming project you're most excited for?
I was talking to your wife, Kelly, and she famously wrote her book in 5 days. I'm very excited about trying a 5-day creativity challenge where I try and draft a book proposal in 5 days, or even write a book in 5 days, or even, record an album of cover songs in 5 days. I just love the idea of confining myself to a certain period of time and working an intense sprint, which feels way more fun than plugging away with consistency over a very long time.
Okay, cool. You're now, well, you've committed to it on air, so we'll hold you to that.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, man, this has been so much fun. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Where would be the best place for listeners to find out about, obviously, your YouTube channel, the book, Feel Good Productivity, other projects you're up to? Where should listeners go?
Nice. Yeah. But YouTube channel is probably a good one. My website, abdaal.com, is also being in the process of having an elaborate makeover. So hopefully by around June, July 2024, it'll look absolutely sick. But otherwise, check out the book, Feel Good Productivity.
I'd like to close with a line from Rilke. He said, "Try to love the questions themselves and live them now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live your way into the answer." With that in mind, what is the question that is most alive for you right now? And what question would you like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah. The question that's most alive for me right now, and the question I'd like to leave listeners with, is what would your life and work look like if you optimized for enjoyment at every step?
Beautiful. Well, we will wrap with that. Thanks so much, Ali Abdaal. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.